Governor Dannel Malloy has included two proposals in his budget that will directly affect the auto industry. The first is a proposal to eliminate the sales tax break you get when you trade in your car. And a second is a proposal that adds an extra 3% sales tax on cars costing more than $50,000. As you can imagine, that is not sitting well with dealers. Here now to talk about the disconnect is Jim Fleming. He's the president of the Connecticut Auto Retailers Association. Jim, thanks for being here.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Now, I'm going to let you set the scenario because you were kind enough to send in some charts that kind of paint the picture as you see it, and I'll let you kind of use those to explain.
You know, I've listened to Governor Malloy as he's gone around the state, and I respect him greatly because he is listening to people. So we've been talking to the governor, to his people, to legislators, trying to explain that his proposal is going to result in a revenue gap in his budget, not a gain. We project that we're going to lose close to $110 million under his proposal.
And is that the sales tax revenue chart?
Well, yes. What we base it on is, you know, we just came out of a credit crisis at the national level, and sales in Connecticut, car sales went from $9 billion to $6 billion in about a 2-year time period because of credit. What that caused was a drop in state revenue of several $100 million. What the governor is proposing here will have the same effect. It will make it difficult for a consumer to get a car loan unless they want to go to Massachusetts, and we don't want them doing that. And it will also cause jobs. And so the two things the governor is trying to do, balance the budget and keep jobs here, we think these proposals are going to do the reverse of that.
And these numbers are based on what?
These numbers are based on national car sales and also Connecticut car sales.
Okay.
And so if Connecticut car sales drop off, 13% of the state's sales tax is dependent on just the sale of new cars. If this forces people to cross the border to buy their cars, and we think it will because it's going to save them $1,000 by going to Massachusetts to buy the car, Connecticut's going to end up losing sales tax revenue, not gaining it.
Right, which was a point that I believe the Republicans sent over some literature saying that, and that's a trickle down because then it goes, if they're not collecting sales tax and when people register their cars, property tax, it trickles down to a local level.
Absolutely. The towns in Connecticut do tax cars as property tax with a property tax. But I think more importantly, what it's going to do is cause a major job loss in Connecticut. It means that the salespersons and the techs that work on your cars in these dealerships, whether it's a luxury car with this new 3% tax that they're imposing or taking away your down payment credit, it's going to cost jobs here. And we estimate we could lose as many as 700 jobs in Connecticut. Just saw the job statistics today that show that Connecticut has not gained very many jobs at all in the last couple of months. We don't want that to happen.
But it's not that, people will buy cars. Won't it just be that they'll put it off perhaps a little bit? Or?
They're going to do two things. One, they are going to go to Massachusetts and Rhode Island where they can get this credit and buy their cars there. That means all the service work will probably be done there. Those people that don't want to pay 9% on a truck, because you call it a luxury tax, but it affects trucks. The guy who's out plowing your driveway this winter, who's got to replace that truck, his transmission because of the tough winter we had, this new 3% tax is going to apply to him. It's very easy for him to cross the border, incidentally, into New York and buy a car there.
But to that point, maybe is there any way that they could clarify it and say, okay, well, if it is a guy who's buying a plow truck, then we'll make some exception. But if it's a guy buying that new Porsche that's $894,000, maybe that guy could pay the extra 3%.
It's not as easy as you think to clarify, but even if it's a Porsche, the principle is the same. If you've got a guy that's working on that Porsche at a car store that's 20 minutes from the New York border, and you decide to buy your car in New York rather than buy it in Connecticut, that guy's going to end up losing his job. All the service work that gets done on that vehicle, which is usually done at the dealership where you buy it, if you buy it in New York, you'll service it in New York. People don't realize that's $1 billion worth of tax revenue that the state has at risk. We could lose another $20 or $30 million just because of people doing their car work across the border.
But frankly, people buy their cars in other states anyway. I'll give you a personal example. So my parents have bought several cars in New York because my dad was looking for a specific color, a specific kind, and it was in New York. He bought the car in New York, but he doesn't service it in New York. He services it around here.
Well, the statistics we have is that about 85% of the people that buy their car at a dealership, that is where they actually have it serviced. Your dad could be the exception to the rule, but what my point is that it's not about trying to tax the rich guy that's buying a Porsche. It's about the guy that's working on the car, the salesman or woman that's trying to sell that car here in Connecticut that's going to end up losing their job. When this was done in Maine, when these proposals were proposed in Maine, the Maine sales tax dropped almost to zero on cars because people stopped buying cars, or they looked for alternatives, or they bought cheaper cars. And what happened in Maine is, instead of making money for the state, they lost revenue. And that's what we're trying to convince the governor and the legislature of, that it's a job loser and it's a revenue loser for the state.
But there's nothing, I mean, but I guess I kind of see all of those points, except for, I mean, what's the difference if they buy, obviously it'll be less revenue, but if they're buying a cheaper car, they're still buying a car. And people should be buying cars that they can afford.
That's true, but if you're trying to increase revenue and the governor's estimating he's going to make more money, if you buy less expensive cars, which is what happened during the recession, the state ends up getting less tax revenue. The effect of this proposal will be to force people either to delay buying, buy out of state, or buy less expensive cars. And if you're the tax collector in a town and people are buying less expensive cars or keeping old cars, it affects your grand lists. So you're going to see ripples in your local tax bill because people are buying these less expensive vehicles, and when you tax them, you get less money back. So again, it's a tax loser for the state, not a gainer, and we've got to convince the legislature of that, I think, before they pass something like this and end up coming back in special session to fix it.
But will it be a very permanent kind of a loss? I mean, the governor said that these taxes could generate $40 million, which would certainly help the deficit, which I'm sure you agree we all need to help out with. What about shared sacrifice, as he always says? Yeah,
and I understand that, but our point is that he's not going to make the $40 million. He's going to lose it. It's going to make the budget situation worse, not better. So I think if these proposals are adopted and he stands to lose over $110 million rather than gain 40, the legislature is going to have to come back and fill that gap at some point, and that's going to be in September when all of a sudden they realize, like Maine did years ago, oh my goodness, we made a mistake. The Maine legislature came back in special session and had to repeal these very same kind of changes in their law.
And what was the effect of the repeal?
The effect of the repeal was sales went back up and Maine began to bring in tax revenue again. So what you don't want to do, you don't want to make the budget deficit worse by moving too quickly and not properly analyzing budgets. That's how Connecticut got to where they are today. They weren't careful and thoughtful about their spending and tax practices in the past. The governor's trying to do that right now. He wants good, solid tax proposals. I don't think this is a good, solid tax proposal. I think he loses money here.
And what kind of support do you have in the legislature?
I think they don't want to come back in September either. I served there myself as a legislator for many years. They want to do this, and they want to do it right the first time. So they are receptive. The governor's office has been receptive, at least listening to us. I give them a lot of credit for that. We just hope they take our advice on this one so they don't have to come back and fix it later.
Right. It's an interesting topic, and everyone buys a car, so we're glad to have you here to talk about it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks to Jim Fleming. He's the president of the Connecticut Auto Retailers Association. Now, next, why at a time when the governor is talking all about consolidation, there's a push to create a new department in the state?